Jai Mahamaya Ki Jai. We'll go on with chapter 50 from the Devi Bhagavatam Retold by Ramesh Menon. Vedavyasa said the Devi Bhagavati is the kernel within the husk, that is all the other gods. She is the Parashakti who sets men free from the bondage of birth and death. She is the highest deity and the final ardhana any man can aspire to. The ultimate worship and bliss is when his heart is melted in the Parashakti, which is the Devi. King Janamejaya asked, the Bhagavati came as Uma, Lakshmi, and Saraswati for Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. How is it, my lord, that Uma and Lakshmi were also daughters of a mountain and the sea? Once there were some Danavas called the Halas. They were terrible past imagining and as powerful. They had a boon from Brahma with which they conquered the three worlds, drove the Devas out of heavens, and then laid siege to Kailash and Vaikuntha. Shiva and Vishnu came forth to fight the Asuras, and a stupendous battle ensued that lasted 60,000 years. At last the two great gods slew the demons and returned to their homes, and they boasted about their exploits to their wives, Gauri and Lakshmi. In truth, finally, the goddesses themselves had subtly infused their lords with their own irresistible Shaktis, and it was thus that the demons were slain. So when Vishnu and Shiva bragged about their victory, their women laughed softly at them with a trace of gentle scorn. Growing incensed and deluded by Parashakti, the gods spoke in anger to their women. They even abused them, whereupon Gauri and Lakshmi left their husbands and vanished. At once, with their Shaktis gone, the two gods grew wan and dull. Their power, all their majesty, faded in a moment, and they became like the two beggars on madmen even. They gnashed their teeth and cried out all sorts of nonsense, and there was chaos in the heaven and earth and in the nether realms as well. The Devas, indeed, all the living, were gripped by a strange panic. Day and night no longer followed each other with order, but the sun was a wayward spirit in the sky, and so too the moon and the stars. Thunderstorms lashed the earth, and the oceans of the world breached their shores in fury and swept over the continents. Icy mountains spewed lava from their crowns, and the home of men and beasts were threatened. Brahma saw all this and grew anxious. He was obliged to assume Vishnu and Shiva's tasks well. He feared the pralaya had come betimes, and that all of the careful creation in long, delicate time would be laid waste. He called his son Manu and the other rishis, Daksha, Sanaka, and the others, and said to them, bring peace again to Vishnu and Shiva. I am bound with too many tasks and cannot do this myself. Worship the Parashakti, for it is by her wrath that the two gods are desolate. The rishis took themselves to a Himalayan forest, and there began to chant the Bij mantras of the Devi Bhagavati without pause. 100,000 human years passed. At last the Devi appeared before them. She was three-eyed and of the triune form of Satchitananda, absolutely merciful. Overwhelmed, the Munis prostrated themselves at her feet and cried, O Mother of the universe, bless us. She said, ask me for anything, Munis. I am pleased with your tapasya. They said, Bhagavati, be united again with Shiva and Vishnu. Daksha said, be born as my daughter and marry Shiva. Another Muni said, be born as the daughter of the ocean and be Vishnu Shakti again. The goddess murmured, Shiva and Vishnu are paying for their own pride. They must repent. I will give them the Maya mantra soon, and they shall have their Shaktis back. And she vanished before their eyes. Daksha and the Munis came to Brahma and told him what the Devi had said. When Vishnu and Shiva were told, they were contrite and their arrogance left them like a spirit in the night. The Devi blessed them, and they had back their former splendor and harmony, and peace was restored to the creation, for the Trimurti ruled again. Then in time, the Devi herself was born to Daksha Prajapati and his wife Asikni as a brilliant child. The quarters were tranquil when she was born. The three worlds were suffused with grace. The sky echoed with the sound of the Devas' dubis, and the air was laden with the subtle music of the Gandharvas. The rays of the suns were like shafts of bright crystal, somehow purer than the Devi had been born as a child of the flesh and blood. The winds were auspicious and fragrant that day, as were Devaloka, Bhumi, and Patala. A sacred current coursed through their creation, and bliss pervaded all things and creatures. Why, the mute rock seemed to sing for ecstasy that she, the Immaculate One, had been born to be Shiva's bride. Shiva lived as Rudra on white mystic Kailash, which communes with the stars. Daksha and his wife named their daughter Sati, for she was an embodiment of the truth, and when she came of age, they gave her to Shiva to be his bride. But ill omens attended the wedding of Shiva and Sati, for the planets were not worshipped as they should be before the marriage rites. Shiva himself was too eager, after being separated from his Shakti for an age, to return to his home in Kailash with her, and indeed to make love with her. This haste was inauspicious, and Daksha, who was loath to be parted from his child, whom he doted fiercely on, was unhappy. Now Daksha Prajapati, sire the race of the earth, was not above being arrogant himself. After he gave his exquisite Sati away to Shiva, he began to compare himself to his son-in-law, and indeed to envy him. Once at a certain yagya the Devas held, Shiva and Sati did not rise to greet Daksha when he entered the yagyashala. It would have been sacrilege to do so, since they attended the yagya as Mahadeva and his immortal Shakti, and not as Daksha's daughter and son-in-law. They were his superiors, and he would have been cursed if they had paid any homage to him by rising or bowing. But that Muni was incensed. He screamed at Shiva, "All the yagya rises to greet him when Daksha Prajapati enters, but not his own half-naked son-in-law, who lives in a burning god, his body smeared with ashes, his hair matted in filthy jata, snakes coiled around his body, and bhutas and pretas, his only friends. Arrogant fool, I rue the day I gave my daughter to you. I sinned when I did, and this is my payment for that sin." Shiva's bull, Nandishvar, roared at Daksha. "Vainglorious Prajapati, it is the Parabrahman whom you dare curse. May you and your race of Brahmanas lose the Vedas one day. In the Kali Yuga, witless rich, your kind shall still chant the Holy Scriptures, but you will have forgotten their inner meaning. And in this life, you shall have a goat's head for what you have dared to say to my Lord. I expel your naked master from this yagya," hissed Daksha, and stalked away. "Shiva is the yagya, fool," Nandashari roared after him. Daksha was so angry that soon he held another yagya of his own on the banks of the Golden Ganga. It was unparalleled. And he called all the Devas and Rishis to it. He called all the Brahmins and Gandharvas. Anyone was present at Daksha's yagya, but he did not call Shiva or Sati. One morning, a few days before the yagya began, Sati saw her sister Rohini passing the Himalaya with her lord Soma, the moon. She sent a Shakti to ask Rohini where she was going clad in her finery. Soma said to the Saki. Why are you going to Daksha Satra? Aren't Shiva and Sati going? The Saki brought this news back to Sati, who ran to Shiva with it. She was in tears when she came into the crystal cave where her Lord sat amongst his ganas. Shiva made her sit beside him and wiped her tears. He asked in concern, "What has happened, my love? Why are you crying?" She sobbed, "My father's holding a great yagya beside the Ganaka. All the devas and rishis have been called, Brahma and Hari have been invited, but not us, Shiva." Shiva said gently, "Your father thinks of me as his enemy." "Oh no, I am his daughter. You are his son-in-law. How can he think of us as enemies? It is just that he does not formally invite one's nearest and dearest ones, but takes it for granted as they will come. Come, my lord, let us not waste time. The yagya is to begin tomorrow. We must set out at once." But Shiva said, "I will not go to Daksha's yagya. I tell you, he thinks of me as his enemy, and he has not called us purposely to insult you and me." But Sati sobbed, "My lord, he is my father. How can I not go to his yagya?" "You can go if you like. Take Nandin and other ganas with you. Take my vimana and attend your father's sacrifice, but I will not come." So with some of her Shaktis and some of Shiva's ganas, Sati set out for Shiva in Shiva's vimana for her father's yagya. Nandishvara went before her through the air as a great and resplendent bull. As she left, Shiva clasped her into his arms, and a pang of anxiety wrung his heart. But he said nothing of it at the hour of her leaving. Indeed, this was the first time they had been parted since the day they were married, and Sati went weeping from Kailash. She arrived at Daksha's glorious Yagyashala, where the gods and goddesses had gathered to bless the Prajapati Yagya. Daksha and his wife were radiant today, and everything was quite splendid. Her mother, Ashikni, and her sisters ran forward to embrace Sati, but Daksha ignored her and glowered at his wife and the other daughters, so they quickly left Sati alone. She cried in dismay, "Father, why are you ignoring me? Aren't I your daughter too? Why did you not invite Shiva and me to your yagya?" He replied, "Invite that half-naked upstart Yogan. I am not mad to call every beggar on earth to my yagya. This is a solemn and auspicious occasion. I shan't have a naked fellow covered with ashes and serpents who has no mother or father at my yagya." Then he softened, "But you are my daughter, and you may have your share of the hobbies, but not as that beggar's wife." Sati said in deadly calm, "He who speaks like this of Lord Shiva, the dust from whose feet the devas wear on their heads, must surely go to hell. And those who listen unprotesting to him. My Lord was right when he said to you, you were his enemy. I should not have come here. I am defiled by your arrogance, Father. I should have stayed with my husband, for now I cannot return to him. I am still your daughter, your flesh and blood, though I would not be. O evil Father, how I hate myself that I am your child." Her eyes blazed, and she said, "Look, I cast off this body born from your loins, as if it were a corpse. I shall be my Lord's wife again when I am born to a father I can love." Sati grew awesomely still. She sipped holy water, covered her head and face with her garment, and thinking of Shiva, she entered into a yogic trance. She balanced the winds, Pana and Apana. She lifted the third wind, Udana, from her umbilical chakra up through her heart, through her throat, and fixed it between her eyebrows. In a flash, a fire from within consumed her body, and it fell apart in pale ashes. When Shiva heard what had happened, his roar shook heaven and earth. From his body he extruded the dreadful Gana, Virabhadra, and also a Shakti black as the void, terrible Bhadrakali, with wild elephants for her earrings. With 1,000 other Ganas, those two came howling down upon Daksha's yagya and devastated it. With their lord's power, they killed most of the Devas and Munis. Virabhadra struck Vishnu down and Brahma fled. Finally, Viradana and Bhadrakali caught Daksha as he tried to flee and plucked his head off with their nails. Then, for a time, they kicked his head back and forth between them in a ghoulish game. At last, Shiva himself materialized there, and the Devas and the Rishis that remained alive fell at his feet and begged his forgiveness that he had come to Daksha's yaga when the haughty Prajapati had not invited him. More than anything, that they had stood apart when Sati consumed herself with fire. Shiva forgave them, and he restored all those whom Virabhadra, Bhadrakali, and their Ganas had slaughtered. Then he asked, "Where is Daksha?" Virabhadra brought that Prajapati's head and flung it down before Shiva with a grin. The other rishis begged that the Lord to forgive Daksha and restore his life. And Shiva, who is also Shankara the merciful, did so. He had the sacrificial goat beheaded and gave his father-in-law the goat's head and his life back. Then Shiva took up Sati's ashes. He wore her delicate bones around his neck and as a garland, and ranged the earth like a madman, howling in grief. It is told he fell into the Yamuna, and the river was burned as midnight blue color from his sorrow. And as Shiva roamed the earth, east and west, north and south, dementedly, Sati's ashes fell from his hands across the holy land, and wherever they fell, the very earth became sacred in the Devi's name, and those tirthas are called Siddha Pithas. These are the 108 Pithas and Devis, O king. Bole Baba ki jai, Jagdambe Mata ki jai, Haidakhandi Mata ki jai, Vishveshvari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.